Welcome back to Lights, Mics and Studios. My name of course is Charl, and we're still in my shed. Last week I started sharing about being messy and dirty and actually then saying everything is true and noble and you're fine when in actual fact you aren't. And that's something else that I want to talk about today, which is closely related to that. And I'm still in the shed for that exact same reason. And that's the fact that I use this shed of mine, not only for a safe place to store all my stuff that I feel precious and that need to be locked, and that my wife doesn't want, stuff like lawnmowers and stuff like that, all my tools especially. But I use this space as my woodwork shop. That's why it's messy and dirty, because there's sawdust absolutely everywhere. If you're working with wood, you get dirty, that's the way it is. But there's two basic principles to woodworking that I would like to share with you in this day. And seeing as that it's Likes, Mics and Studios and we can't get into likes or mics for now because COVID-19 and the lockdown and the stage 4 of lockdown, phase 4, whatever it's called, of the lockdown, we can't get into studios and we can't go to live performances. Thus, I'll share with you my other hobbies. Now, woodworking. First basic principle of woodworking. How do you make something out of wood? Take different pieces of wood and then you tie them together and glue them together and you file them and you grind them and you use your saw and you use sanding paper and all the likes until you get something that's beautiful. Something that you feel is worthwhile to show the world. But there's a very important thing within that wood that I would like to share with you. I myself completely dislike painting wood. I see the fact that I am woodworking or using woodworking to take wood, original wood, be that pine, Oregon pine, Meranti, whatever wood we're using. I grind that and I sand that down and I cut it into certain pieces. Then you choose the best piece of wood or the best looking piece of wood, and that will be the front of the table or the most visible part of the table, stuff like that. And the reason I then don't paint it, but rather just varnish it or stain it or seal it sometimes just only so that there can't be water moisture, is to bring forth the actual look of the wood. Something that's been there the entire time. I just used my craftsmanship to bring it forth, to make it look better than what it was. First principle. Second principle, that takes time. Bringing forth something within wood that's beautiful, something that's worthwhile looking at, takes time, right? And when I'm doing that, I'm doing it sometimes at odd times of the hours. If I'm not using power tools, I can do it 10, 11 o'clock at night. My entire family is sleeping. I lock myself in my woodworking shop and I just go at it. Grind and sand and saw and file and create these, what I like to call, I know that I won't get a lot of money for it, of course not, but I like to think they're beautiful. I like to think it's stuff that is well made and it's handy to have around the house 90% of the time. But mostly, it's time that I'm spending with God, doing these things. Every time I put a piece of wood in the bench and I start to use my rasp and you shape it in the way that I think it needs to be, whether I'm using the planer, I'm seeing that as my life. That piece of wood is my life. And as I'm filing or planing it, that's exactly the same thing that God is doing to me. Putting His planer on me, His word as the rasp or the planer or the sanding paper, and removing bits of pieces that should not be there in the first place. Bits of pieces that shouldn't be there. Now, why I'm saying this is the second principle is this is quality time that I'm spending with the Lord by not, and I should say that it's very important, when I'm not praying and I'm not reading the Bible, and 90% of the time I'm not even listening to worship music. I'm doing something that God has actually crafted me with to do. I'm using one of my talents to glorify Him by means of woodworking, not preaching, not doing these videos, woodworking. That's the second principle. Coming back to the first principle. Coming back to the first principle, as I said earlier, that's exactly what God is doing to us. But there's a vital thing that you should remember. Everything that's been rasped or sanded or planed and then stained or sealed or whatever has been there from the beginning. I just used my craftsmanship to make it look better. or appealing or to restore it sometimes. That's exactly what God is doing in our lives. He's using His Word, His Spirit, His presence, His body, His church, His worship, His preaching to restore us to what He's made us right at the beginning. He's using all these tools. He's the great crafter. He's the great creator. He is the great carpenter. And we are His mere creation. And He's using what He can to bring forth the beauty that is within us. Sometimes when I'm working on the wood, I can see that the wood is struggling to allow me to do what it wants, because it's hard wood sometimes, it's against the grain or whatever. We do the exact same thing. We struggle. We don't allow God in. We want to keep God at bay. And then sometimes, after a bit of hard work, you get through that stiff part or the hard part. Then all of a sudden, every single thing falls in place and it looks beautiful. Beautiful. My lounge piece, my dining room rather, when people come in, they can't believe it's the same table that I've had for the last 10 years because it's been woodworked, it's been sanded and planed and restored to look better than what it was. When people that saw me in primary school and early in high school walk a bit of a road with me now, if they see me now as a person, can't believe it's the same person. Because I've allowed the great carpenter to do his work on me. Spend some time in COVID-19. I know that we should be doing homeschooling and Zoom meetings and all the likes. Spend some time with your Creator, doing your hobbies, as long as they are pure and wholesome. Pray to God, read His Word, and allow the great carpenter to shape and mold you to something that you need to be.